Good evening and welcome to the Whiskey Wednesday edition. Joining as my co-host yet again, the ninja, Dr. Jason Pittman. On tonight's episode, we're going to talk the differences between knowledge versus skill. I'm your host, Dr. Dan Ford, and this is EchelonOrchid.
Guess who's back?
Ninja, cheers, my friend. Is it a sober Wednesday for you?
Just water, man.
Just water. Oh. So it's vodka. It's Coors Light.
I said it's water, not piss.
Oh man. So, tonight I am drinking a little bit of Uncle Nearest. That's not too shabby. Like they make some good stuff. You know, I don't know that this Tennessee whiskey is going to hold up to Indiana whiskey in the long run, but you know, it's pretty decent. I dig it. So how's your week going, man? What's going on? What's new?
Fantastic, man. School's essentially done. I'm just running out the rest of this contract until it's time to start another one. And I got all my grades done ahead of time, well before the due date. So it's smooth sailing for me. I had a student, speaking of whiskey, gift me. I was very, very honored by this. A nice 16-year Lagavulin.
It's good. It's a good overall. It's a good. It's a good. It is Islay. As we were. I think we were talking about it last week. I had to look it up. So Lagavulin is the from the main brands the second most highly peated Scotch in whereas the first is Lefroy.
Yeah.
And it's basically just, for those that don't know, I mean, mainly it just comes to how much peat moss they're using in order to, I don't remember what the actual chemical is that they're looking at, but it's as you're doing it, you measure how much parts per million and it just like Lagavulin could make it a heavier peat. They just think that this is their thing. Like this is how much peat they want in their brand, and hey, fair enough.
At least for me, because I like that taste. Once I got used to it, because I think it's like a two-stage thing. You got to have an acquired taste for single malt, and then you have to have an acquired taste for the Islay peat process. It's certainly smooth compared to Lefroy. I really like Lefroy because, well, like most things, if you're going to do it, let's just do it and get down with it. But man, that was a really nice thank you.
Yeah, dude. I mean, for a student, it's not cheap. I don't know what the price is in North Carolina, but here it's a $70 bottle of whiskey.
Yeah. It's in the low 80s here. Now, to be fair, this dude also won 2 competitions. I mean, thousands of dollars. So
even still, the gesture,
well, that's what mattered to me, man.
Dude,
you know what
I mean, he's like, hey, thank you. And so for those people that may like to enjoy some single malt whiskeys, if you're like, oh, I can't really get into the Islay whiskeys, start with the Highlands because the Highlands are a little bit peated, and then from there, you can start. Then you can go to like a Talisker or something like that, but it'll be perfectly fine. You may not get up to a Lefroy. Or even you may not get up to a Lagavulin. I mean, they're heavily peated, which I absolutely love in certain occasions. Like if I'm, I just had like a nice, like super spicy meal, which I love spicy meals. I'm going to go outside, especially in the summer, with a little bit of a nice heavily peated Scotch and a cigar and just chill out at that point. That's what I like.
If I want to sit down and read or just think, you know what I mean? And I really, truly want to sip, I like that heavy peat. If I want to work and drink a Scotch, I just want one of the Glens. Glenlivet, Glenfiddich. Taliskers, I enjoy Talisker. There's an Islay that is like an off-brand. I can't even remember what it's called. I've had it on the show a number of times because it's on the cheaper side. That's a go-to.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm reading this other book on Scotch. All right, just the history of it and It's written in 1930. Okay, and so I'm like, okay, I mean, this is because that was like the first like book on Scotch at the time, and it's a reprint, and the author, which I can't remember the name, but the author's like, hey, I couldn't find this cat anywhere else in any other literature, but this is really great. So I did some research and basically found out it was a pseudonym. So but so the original author, he first goes off and he starts just like putting everyone on blast. Everyone is on blast during this thing. Like he's calling out all of the wine snobs, and he's like, you learned vineyards by reading and looking at the labels, not by drinking. For you will talk about all of these great vintages, and then at home you're drinking swill. Like he's like, and then
that's the heart of the difference between knowledge and skill, is it not?
Yeah, absolutely. Like there's an aspect, and so, or as we get into like Goodwill Hunting, where oh shoot, what's his name that passed away?
Robin Williams.
Yeah, Robin Williams goes, hey, the Sistine Chapel, you could tell me all about it, but you can't tell me how it smells.
Exactly.
Right. So then he goes, but hey, look, those wine experts that have done all this and put dedication into their craft, my hat's off to you, because you're enjoying the vintage and not just for the vintage sake. Like you're not just going, oh, here it is. Like, these things. He goes, but I equally hate the people that drink whiskey to get drunk.
Yeah.
Whiskey is meant to be enjoyed and not to just get a physical alteration and to get drunk. And so for those people that are drinking in that manner, I curse you just as much as I curse those wine stuff. Like, I'm like, wow, like this guy is just, he's salty. I'm like, woo. But it's a short book. It's a 130-page book. I'm on page 80 or something like that. It's interesting because he just gets into the whole history of, he's like, he goes, you want to start a fight if you're over in Scotland or Ireland, if like whichever one you're in, say the other one is the one that invented whiskey or single.
Yeah.
And a fight will come out, because he goes, in all reality, he's like, we have no way of truly knowing. There's no way. They're right next to each other. Scotland was a little bit more isolated because Ireland was conquered first, and the English went there first and started doing it, and then eventually us. But we traded, we fought, we were all kinsmen, so we probably all did it about the same time.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, super interesting as to how everything. But getting into the knowledge versus skill. I was listening to a podcast with John Danaher. I hope I'm saying his name right. I don't know if it's Danaher. I don't know, but whatever. He's arguably the best Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu coach in the world right now. I mean, he's got champions in multiple weight classes and multiple overall, we'll say federations for a lack of a better word. And his people are all really, really good. And so I'm listening to this thing, and I've recently got back into my martial arts journey. I've started Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu up. I haven't actually ever done straight ground fighting. I've always done, I started off with Aikido. I did some Korean art, and then I got into traditional Chinese martial arts. And so, a lot of striking. I know how to strike. At least for someone that's unskilled, they wouldn't have the same striking. I've had a lot of training. So. But I've never truly done any like real ground fighting. And so one of the things that I caught from what he was saying was that, and this was, so I, looking up John Danaher a little bit more. I mean, I'd only heard about him and just like, I'll read some MMA news, something like that. But I never really like looked into the guy. Mainly because, and one of the things that he says is, hey, all these people that I've trained, there's thousands of more people that I trained that never made it, that quit, that I failed. So with all these, world-class athletes that I've been able to train that have done well, would they have still been a world-class athlete without me and maybe have reached the same thing? It's possible. They would definitely, they would have been good. Like I'm just like 10% I'm that 10% that got them to be the best in their division or whatever. I'm like, hey, fair enough. Pretty legit way to look at it. The teacher can only take so much credit for the effort and the work that the student puts in. So I find that he was on Joe Rogan's show 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, that was a good episode.
Yeah, and so I rewatched that episode, and I went. Now, for those who don't know me, Joe Rogan is, he's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I mean, the guy, he knows what he's doing, like, and not from, even though, which was funny because in that episode, he made fun of Eddie Bravo. He's like, your teacher's shit. Like, no, I mean, he knows all of them. Like, he's like, giving him a hard time, and Joe's like, oh, whatever. So John starts going, so why do you want to take the person to the ground? Joe's like, so I could choke him out. It's like, no, it's more like fundamental. Like, what's the true reason? And Joe's like, I'm not sure I understand. And so John goes, all right, so bring up an Olympic javelin thrower. He goes, now look at this, watch this person throw. He's running. And as he's running a good 50 meters. And then he winds up to throw this javelin. And he throws the javelin and it goes 80, 90 meters. Like, that's a lot of energy, a lot of mechanics. Everything had to be on point. All that energy. Joe's like, yeah, it's pretty amazing. He goes, now imagine that javelin thrower doing it from their knees. Maybe he could throw it 20 meters. He's not throwing it 90 meters. It's like that energy. When you get someone on the ground, they can no longer use their potential kinetic energy to harm you. You've neutralized it. Mm-hmm. So now, what's the most dangerous thing? And, Joe answers, the legs. He's like, yes, that's why the first thing you want to do is get out of the legs. And then, he starts going on and on about all the stuff. And so, which was interesting to me because Joe Rogan's no slouch. And he's like, oh my gosh, I never thought of it like that. Probably part of the reason is because John is also a PhD in philosophy. So he thinks differently. He wants to know every little piece. So we fast forward a little bit more. And he starts talking about the difference on a different show, difference between knowledge and skill. And I was interested in this part because he essentially says repetitions are insignificant. Do they matter? Yes, but only when done with a higher degree of opponents that are putting pressure on you. If in most times when you do training, there's no pressure. But then when you go into a real fight or a competition, there's 100% pressure and resistance.
Right.
So he's like, look, the person who does this thing 10,000 times with no varying degree of resistance during that journey, you could do it 1 billion times and you will never become better at that. And then he makes a statement along the lines of, it is not possible to achieve skill without knowledge, but it is more possible that you will achieve knowledge and never be able to attain skill.
Right. Yeah, I would agree with that, man.
And I thought that was, very profound. And so I started thinking, well, how can this be applied to everything? And, well, it can be applied to everything. You can spit out what Wikipedia has, or you can do it, stand on the shoulders of giants, come up with your own opinions based on the experience and the education, and then make it better. Or you can just complain.
Oh boy. Yeah, I think fundamentally what that philosophy is getting at is repetitive practice. Like in sports, we both have experienced this. The idea of repetitive practice is to develop muscle memory. But it's incomplete because that muscle memory is only a mechanic. It's not the assembly of mechanics into a behavior, right? And what skill is a manifestation of knowledge into a behavior, right? That behavior we call a skill. And then we try to compartment that skill so that it's a skill amongst skills that create this collection of behaviors, and then you have this emergent construct. Danaher has a very particular philosophy about how to assemble those pieces into what produces championship level behaviors in jiu-jitsu. It's really interesting. Because I'd heard the guy's name a lot. I don't know that I'd even seen a picture of him, let alone heard him talk or read any of his words until he was on that Rogan podcast. And I'll be honest with you, I'm kind of surprised that he's never sat back to produce some type of book. Not a training video per se or a training book per se, but more of a here's my philosophy of how you go about this. Much in the way, we were talking about in the pre-show that the underlying thought behind that is Bruce Lee's quote about, fear the man that practices one thing 10,000 times, not 10,000 things one time. But what Bruce Lee was getting at was singular purpose or singular focus, not repetitive mechanical practice. And of course, Bruce Lee perhaps is most famous for his books and his development of Jeet Kune Do, which really was a philosophy of fighting, not necessarily the martial art of fighting itself, even though it was that.
Right. Yeah, it's very true. One of the, when I started listening more and more to John, like this was the thing, he broke down Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu into 4 parts on the Joe Rogan show, but I won't get into that. The thought that I thought was very interesting overall was that, and my numbers might be a little bit off, but you'll get the overall synopsis of where I'm going. He's like, hey, there's 80 different types of submissions you can do in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Only 6 of them are practical to use in any competition or the real world. And that's it. So I only focus on those 6, and we're going to do those 6 amazingly well, because those are the only 6 that matter. Everything else, it looks pretty, but you're not pulling that off in a true competition unless you're a high degree of skill and you're going up against a very low degree. If you're all black belts, you're not pulling off a lot of these things. You're just not doing it. So right. I don't teach it. It's heel hooks, it's leg locks, it's a couple different kinds of chokes. It's a Kimura. Like that's it. Like it's like there's no reason, because you're not going to do it. Like it's not necessary. So I'm like,
I got a question, man. Not to interrupt your train of thought, but so did you get to roll with anybody a little bit when you went to jiu-jitsu?
Yeah.
It's a different world when somebody grabs you with that grappler strength, isn't it?
I don't know that aspect, right? So the thing was, one, okay, so they were all, so the 2 that I got to truly roll with were both purple belts. So they're not, and actually one is getting ready to get his brown belt. So it's not like they're low level, right? They've been doing it for a while. So the thing that I appreciate, and I also can appreciate, like for them, it's much more dangerous to roll with me than for me to roll with them. And,
sure.
And people may not understand this aspect, but so having done this much martial arts, I was put in that situation because the lower level person will take more risks and will do things that they're not trained at doing it, will apply the technique incorrectly and start to try to use strength rather than technique, and will hurt the person. So it's always dangerous for that high belt person to spar, to roll with the lower, level person. Also, because the low level person will take risks because they're like, hey, what do I got to lose if I just got submitted by, a purple belt or brown belt, a black belt, and I'm, a white or a blue? Like it's, there's no shame. So you'll take more risks. So, but I knew that. And so I definitely appreciated that they were taking it easy and walking me through after we did something, like, how to properly get in your hooks when you're in full mount, how do we start off with the actual rolling, how to apply the techniques, and then they would tell me, okay, like I was pretty. I'll say I thought it was a great compliment when they said that I know how to utilize my weight distribution quite well.
Right. That's a big thing.
Yeah. And so they're like, look, you're able to lay heavy, which is great, especially when you're in a dominant position.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the one guy who actually has had a couple of fights, and he's an MMA guy. Like he's the one that's almost a brown belt and does all these other things. He was also pretty big into collegiate wrestling in the area. So, he's done some local fights. And so he's like, hey, look, here's the thing. When you're on top, you can provide no space.
Yeah.
That space is my room to work.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you're on the bottom position, provide as much space as you want, because you're hoping they're going to grab, so then you can find space and get in there. So he did that, and like when he would do something, I'm like, okay, how did you do that? And he's like, okay, you did this, and therefore I did that, and then you did this, and this is how I was able to get that sequence of events.
Yeah.
So they were all like so super cool, and explained everything. Like there was no ego, which, hey, I appreciate, and it's also not something that happens in pretty much any other martial art that I've ever gone to for a first time. And I've done many different styles. So everyone there always has an ego, and they always want to kind of show off. Yeah. Nope. Not one of them. I mean, they all, before we would slap hands and bump to start the roll, they're like, hey, look, got any injuries? Your shoulder's okay. Like they wanted to genuinely know, so they could, make sure they don't hurt you and do something that's going to make, because they want you to come back. I mean, it's not, they need more people all the time, because everyone brings something a little bit different. So super cool people, all super, super nice, humble, respectful, genuine people. So for me, going to a, I don't even know if they call Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu a dojo or not. I'm assuming it is a dojo, but because it comes from the Japanese. So I assume that's what it is. So, they were just like
usually a pretty chill group.
Yeah. Yeah. I could tell that like there's a big difference with the college wrestler and guy that's, brown belt. Yeah. Like he knows what he's doing, but he's much smaller. And he said something brilliant to me. He said, hey, look, there's only so much strength I'm ever going to get. I'm only ever going to be so fast. But what I need is perfect technique. If I have perfect technique, I can beat someone faster and stronger than me every single time, as long as I have perfect technique.
Well, and that's back to your original point. That's what the ground does. The ground neutralizes a lot of just raw, brute power.
Well, and that also comes with, he at least knows that technique is skill.
Yeah.
And he needs knowledge, and the knowledge comes with experience, in this case, of being able to apply what you've learned. So,
see, and that's why in my experience, if you look at like the belt testing system, at least for gi, like traditional Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gi, the requirements to pass rank are much higher than they are, like, for instance, in Taekwondo, because in my experience, Taekwondo is largely just knowledge. Why? Well, just like boxing, right? Or any contact martial art, you can't really spar all that much, all that often, because you accumulate trauma. The beauty of BJJ, or any grappling art, really, it's not high impact like judo, is you can spar nonstop. And then when you get tired, you just take a little break and you can spar more. And so what you're doing is at least all the sessions I ever went to, wrestling, folk wrestling, and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you do a little bit up front, which is really kind of a warm-up of like knowledge, mechanical skill, repetition drill. And then maybe that's 10 minutes. And the next hour is just rolling with people constantly. And so you're manifesting those mechanics into experience, which generates skill because you're immersed in it. That's the idea as I perceive it.
Yeah. So what they did, very similar. So we worked on a trip and a throw, because you got to get the person to the ground, Right?
Yeah.
That's the first rule of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is get the person to the ground. Right. Second rule is get past their legs, which everyone I'm like, okay, you know, getting past someone's legs is pretty difficult when you don't necessarily know how to do it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of had a concept, but I did it the way in which you're not supposed to do it, which opened me up to, well, being swept. Right.
Yeah.
But then they told me, okay, now let's get back the same way but do this. And I'm going to, and they provided resistance in order. So they made me work for it. Like it was not, I don't think they were just letting me. Maybe they may have somewhat, but maybe they were applying 10%. I mean, I don't do ground fighting, so I have no idea. Like I'm not, I would have stand up. I would have used my speed and the dynamite, in my hands in order to, I don't want to go to the ground because I know I have an advantage with speed and technique on my feet. So why would I want to go to the ground?
Right.
Well, I also realized because someone asked me, well, why do you want to do this? And I'm like, well, I'll tell you why. I don't want to go somewhere and start getting punched in the face again.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to be 46 years old. I don't want to get punched in the face. It doesn't feel good.
Nope.
At 24, I didn't like getting punched in the face, but I knew I had to do it because that's what I was doing. I don't want to get punched in the face anymore. So, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu allows me to, still use some speed to get the person to the ground. It doesn't, but from that point, I feel like I can outthink people at that point to get to where I need to go.
Well, and in my experience too, it's way more enjoyable because you're not accumulating trauma like you are in a striking martial art. I really enjoyed boxing. I enjoyed the mechanics of boxing. I didn't enjoy sparring because, well, one, I don't like hurting people fundamentally. Not in like that kind of situation, right? I didn't have a problem getting punched, but it wasn't my favorite thing in life. And you just accumulate small little traumas over time that it stops you from moving forward at some point. The perfect analogy for me in my life is the difference in my experience between running and cycling. I don't like running, but I've learned how to do it. But the problem is you accumulate trauma and you get injuries. With cycling, I can cycle nonstop because there's no trauma. There's no impact. You just fucking stay on top of the bike.
Yeah, as long as you don't fall, as long as someone else doesn't cause something, which accidents can happen.
Sure they do.
And sure, in Brazil, in BJJ, accidents can happen. So I was, so how they did the class, we started off with a particular type of hip toss, and then a particular type of trip, and then we went to how to apply that in real world scenarios. So when someone is pulling on you, here's how this applies. When someone is pushing on you, here's how this applies, and then do it, right? So, and you don't know which your partner is going to do. You're to react, which is good because you get to do that. And then their philosophy is, there's, I don't know, what is it? 18 different locks, escapes type things that you got to do. And so their thing is that we go over some of those every class. And actually applying them appropriately because, well, you're going to be tested on them. And what they had found over the years is that no one really pays attention to it until they get to that aspect where they're going to go test for their purple. They cram it for a month, then they get it, and then they never use it again, and they lose it. And then they didn't want that. So they said, we do some of that every class, and we rotate to make sure we're getting these things done appropriately, which is the part that I like. Appropriately. It's not mechanics. It's being done with the proper amount of resistance in order to achieve skill, not just knowledge. So,
yeah, right.
So then from there, we go into rolling. So, half the class was probably rolling, and you just keep rotating. And so I sent Croyler an email after the next day, like so super sore. I should expect. I haven't trained in martial arts since 2016. I just haven't had the time. And plus, out here in South Bend, Indiana, there was nothing like what I wanted to do. They had Kempo karate. That's just not for me. I'm not looking at that. I prefer the internal Chinese systems at this point, because I wanted to focus on proper breathing,
Mhm.
qigong, energy, and not a high impact level, like no sparring. Like I wasn't not interested in sparring at this point.
Right.
I just, because I'm gonna get hit eventually, and like I said, 46. I'm not trying to have a broken nose again. I've had plenty of broken noses. I don't need another one.
No, I don't like the taste of iron. It's not fun, dude.
Definitely not. So Croyler is the grandson for Helio Gracie, and is just a teacher. He's never like done a big amount of competitions. He's like, look, I enjoy teaching. That's what he does. But hey, he's the grandson of one of the best Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and the person, basically someone that's a part of the crediting for this stuff. So again, this goes back to the super cool, super chill, super no ego. I send him an email. Hey, I just want to tell you, I so appreciated everyone there. And like, he wasn't there because I did this class in the morning. He had other, a different instructor. He teaches just the high level classes, which, hey, I get that. I mean, it's
Sure.
Actually, he also teaches a couple kids classes too. So he does like both ends of the spectrum, which I thought that's pretty cool too. I dig that. So I sent him an email. Dude, like 10 minutes later, I get an email response. Hey, so glad you liked it. The soreness will eventually go away. You won't be as sore all the time. You haven't been training for a while, so it's gonna use some different muscles. So, do this. And when am I going to see you again? Like, when are you coming back?
What a great salesman, dude.
Yeah.
That's spot on.
I said, hey, depending on how sore I am, I'll be there Friday morning because they have early morning classes, like super early.
Yeah.
7 a.m. classes, right?
Yep.
Because they're getting ready to move to full time. Like they've got over 200 active students, and so there's just not enough mat time. So they're getting ready to go and hold 4 major classes during the day because they've got so many people that are training full time.
Yep.
So I'm like, the dude opened this dojo. Worst luck ever. February 2020.
Right?
Yeah.
I bet his wife was pissed 2 months later.
Oh, yeah, because they're in the same shopping center as the distillery. That's how I'm like, oh.
Perfect. That's a good relationship. Because I'll tell you one thing about jiu-jitsu players. They do like to imbibe, let's say.
Yeah, and I did let them know that my stuff is going to be much better than proper 12.
Yeah. But you're right, man. If people haven't grappled, it's a different strength. It's plyometric. It's squeezing, and especially in the beginning. And you probably don't have this problem because you've conquered this with sparring and striking. But especially with new grapplers, man, they don't know how to relax. You got to relax and breathe and squeeze when it's time to squeeze. Because the more you squeeze, the more you're tense, the more energy you burn, the faster you get tired. And you can't squeeze forever, man. Try to hang from a fucking bar. It's the same strength.
Yeah.
And that's why I asked that question. Like, if nobody's ever experienced that, I remember the first time I learned how to folk wrestle. And my brother was way better than me. He was really, really, really fucking good. And we both had the same coach because we started in 7th grade and wrestled all the way. My brother wrestled all the way through high school. I did until I got hurt. And we had our junior high history teacher as the coach. And this dude was fucking old school. And the minute he grabbed you, I remember distinctly thinking, oh, no, there's no way I'm getting this dude off me. Ian experienced that. It was the same reaction Ian had. When you get grabbed by somebody that has that plyometric strength of grabbing shit, it's different, man. It's different. It just doesn't feel the same. And that you probably felt the difference between that dude that did wrestling at the collegiate level than somebody else.
Oh,
it's just different.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely. I mean, all these people that were there were definitely skilled, right? Or are at the cusp of achieving proper skill. To me, they knew how to apply things. Like they could say, okay, hey, you did this wrong. Here's this. Like even with some of the different so in the different arts that I did, like we don't do hip tosses. Like you'll do trips.
Yeah, right.
But you're not doing hip tosses because it's you turn your back into someone and and those things that you just don't want to do that. Not that some don't teach it, but it's
not common.
Right? You don't want to turn your back in a striking art, right? So things are more forward or circular, whichever. But hey, to each their own, and every art has advantages and disadvantages. There's truly no, in my opinion, better martial art than another. It's what's best for you, and can you apply those strengths appropriately to defeat whatever's in front of you. If you take someone that doesn't know how to do any striking and try to make them a striker and go against a striker, it's not going to go well. Ben Askren.
Yeah. Well, the dude, that's a perfect example. Well, you saw that back in early UFCs. Remember when like Dan Severn came in and started suplexing people?
Yeah.
And nobody was used to that kind of grappler power. But as soon as other people adapted to a little bit of wrestling defense and stopped those suplexes and then started punching him in the face.
Done.
And that's where you got people like Ronnie Coleman, Mark Kerr, who were Olympic caliber freestyle wrestlers that could fucking punch you in the mouth too.
Yeah. So that's another thing. So this was a great part. So on the John Danaher episode with Joe Rogan, he said, Joe, do you know why certain pins in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu are worth more points than another? And Joe was like, well, it's harder. It's like he was going through. He's like, no, it's because of how much damage someone can do to you in that position of being pinned.
Yep.
Side control is worth X amount of points. Knee on belly is worth this. Full guard or full mount, rear guard. It's about how much damage you could do if this was more than just a grapple.
Yeah. Right.
I'm like, all right. So, getting back, like, were these people like, oh yeah, I mean, they could have manhandled me on the ground. Like, I mean, one, they just, my only chance with someone along those lines is could I keep enough distance and it wouldn't be in a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu match. They would destroy me, because for me, I would lose on negative points, because I would be looking to constantly retreat, and you're not supposed to do. You're not permitted to do that without losing points. And so in a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu match, me not having any skill, they would absolutely destroy me. And even still, if it was an MMA match, they would probably still destroy me, because one, I'm 46 years old, they're in their 20s, and this is what they've been doing for the last however many years. I haven't done anything in the last 5.
Yeah. Well, and to be fair, my point wasn't so much that. I appreciate your honesty and transparency. I feel the same way, for the record. It's just that having done both and been around both, there's a difference in the way somebody physically touches you, in my experience. When somebody's done that type of plyometric grappling, their grasp feels different. Like if you grabbed me versus my brother grabbed me, it feels completely different to me.
Well, yeah, probably, because one, for everything that all of what I have attained in skill is, I don't want to hold on to you. My hold is to release, break apart, maintain distance, not to take you to the ground, not to control you. It's different, right? And so there is a difference, because that's not the muscles that I've worked over time.
That's exactly what I've been talking about. Yes, spot on. And they are physically different muscles.
Oh yeah,
in a different direction.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, when I was truly competing in my mid to late 20s, it was about explosion. It was about that energy, that the angles, everything that Conor McGregor does, which is why, hey, Conor McGregor is a legit striker. I don't know that I believe he's about ready to get his black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I haven't seen the evidence that he has any type of ground fighting skills. I haven't seen it. I feel like I've watched every single professional fight of his multiple times, even in the other what was it, the other promotion he was at before the UFC? I can't remember.
Oh yeah. I
mean,
I don't remember the name either, but yes, he was a double champ there too.
Right. I mean, I've never he has no wins by submission as far as I can recall.
I'm not aware of any.
And all I know is, if you I mean, again, like if he had any type of like if he was truly almost a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, he wouldn't have gotten pounded by Nurmagomedov.
Well, see, but exactly, this speaks to the difference between knowledge and skill. I might concede the point that he's earned a black belt based on his knowledge, which is possible, right?
Well, yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
But when you go up against a black belt that also has skill, a completely different example that we've talked about before. So, roughly speaking, on average, everybody that goes to university has at least somewhere around a 115, 120 IQ, which is high, right? That's not average. That's well above average. But the difference between somebody with 120 and 130 is pretty big.
Oh, yeah.
The difference between 130 and 135 is fucking huge. And because it starts to diverge out. And so that's roughly the way I kind of perceive, okay, he's a black belt, sure. No, okay. He's not the same black belt that a skilled black belt is. Tony Ferguson is a great example. That dude is a legit 10th planet black belt. And he has the skill to back it up. GSP is a great example of somebody that had enough abstract skill that he could transpose that into wrestling and develop a world-class, close to Olympic level wrestling skill set.
What's interesting about GSP, so he was on the Gordon Ryan podcast not too long ago. Okay. And so GSP talks about the first time he went to go train with John Donna here. And the first time, so the first question was back to Gordon. Do you remember the first time you met GSP? He goes, oh my gosh, yes, it was this. And GSP says, I don't remember that at all. Right? Like, which is probably true. And he goes, then the next time I come, I'm now rolling with Gordon because this is John's like top student. And he goes, I felt so humbled by that. And so Gordon's like digging into it. He's digging into it. And he's like, so you guys ask, well, why would you do this? Like, why wouldn't you not train with other MMA guys? And so GSP's response was amazing. It was so super high intelligence in that he said, I feel like karate, because that's what I started with, allowed me to be better with wrestling in mixed martial arts. If I'm going up against another wrestler, those things don't translate. My karate allowed me to attain very good skills in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but not enough to where I could go properly compete at the ADCC. So I always wanted to go and train with specialists. One, it kept me humble. Two, I was able to have that pressure of getting better. And three, what I was the greatest in the world at was taking all of those specialties and making them into an MMA champion at the UFC. That no one could take all of those disciplines like I could and apply them into my art, which is mixed martial arts, which is different. And I'm like, he's like, I train with the best boxers. I train with the best wrestlers. I train with the best karate people. I train with the best BJJ, whatever it was. I trained with the best. And hey, people could say whatever they want. GSP would be on my Mount Rushmore of one of the best mixed martial artists.
Hey, what do you think about this thought, man? While you were talking, I was thinking about this. GSP.
How damn good I look in this.
Well, I mean,
I know it's tough. I get it.
Hey, I understand. I think GSP represents a super athlete. Okay. Another example in combat sports of a super athlete is Mike Tyson. And I think GSP is Mike Tyson if Mike Tyson didn't lose Customato.
I think that's a fair.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, because here's a big thing. So here's another thing. This is another thing that John had said. Any fighter can transform themselves in 5 years. And he took Mike Tyson's example. Mike Tyson met, Gusto Amato at 14. And then by, 20 years old, he's the world champion. Mm-hmm. At 18, he was an internationally recognized top-tier amateur boxer. in 4 years. 2 years after that, he's the heavyweight champion of the world. That if Gus had not passed when he did, Mike Tyson never gets into the trouble that he gets into and likely retires undefeated. I don't think there was be a person alive that could, and this gets back into discipline, which I think you can't achieve skill without discipline. And there's a big aspect that people may not understand. There's external discipline and internal discipline. And the difference is external means you need an organization, you need a governing body, someone that's enforcing you, and you look to that to do your routine. Internal disciplines, I don't need that. I know what I need to do. I'm waking up and I'm getting at it. Mike Tyson at the time, and I think it's different today. At the time, when after Gus left, because his discipline was through external, he wanted to make Gus proud. Like everything he did was to, make him proud and to thank him and show respect to him. And Mike Tyson is a living, walking encyclopedia of combat sports. Like, he knows all these things about it. If Gus doesn't, pass away when he does, Mike Tyson would have had that external discipline that might have eventually transitioned to an internal discipline sooner. And I think today, Mike has that internal discipline because of all the different businesses that he's involved in. So he learned it eventually. He just could not apply it back then.
And a huge reason why is because he was a fucking kid. Kids, this is the difference in education, generally speaking, between pedagogy and andragogy. The pedagogy being the science of teaching kids, and andragogy being the science of teaching adults. Adults are intrinsically motivated. We can motivate ourselves via discipline in a lot of cases, right?
Yeah.
Or some goal system that we've erected. We're able to do that largely because we have the experience sufficient to manifest skill. Kids can't do that. They have to be extrinsically motivated. Grades, right? What adult is really motivated by a grade? Not very many that I've encountered. Right?
Well, you've witnessed that was definitely never my motivation.
It's just not because you don't fundamentally need that external framework, but kids do because they're kids. They don't have sufficient experience to erect that structure for themselves, which is why you have to scaffold the learning for them. That's your purpose. Right?
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, that's
what the science says.
It's true. I mean, so my entire, almost the entire time when I was doing university work, I was an adult. I was working full time. I needed the knowledge, so that way I could apply it and achieve greater skill. And I didn't care about the grade because here's how it broke down. I knew I needed to pass. I knew I needed to pass with at least a B in order to get fully compensated back from my employer. So I also wanted to have a life. Do I need the A? I don't need the A. I just need a B. Just need a B to get my reimbursement. And so what does that mean? Some papers I'm just not going to do. Just like, it doesn't matter. Just not going to do it.
That's an adult decision.
Yeah. And I chose not to do it because I wanted to do other things in my life. The academics wasn't as important. Now, there was a slight alteration to that as I got to U of M to do my MBA. Now I needed to make sure, because of how U of M did everything was in a cohort. A lot of it was all group assignments. So I couldn't take that exact same mentality because also these are the people that I am looking to have a future relationship with in a professional manner for eternity. So I couldn't apply that same thing because now it's no longer solely focused. My individual effort affects their group results. So that became my internal discipline overrode my ability or my thoughts of time versus. So it was much more difficult. It was the first time that I made that decision academically where that was more important. But it was still, again, an adult decision.
Yeah, and it was, and you just hit the nail on the head in my case, in my book. It was intrinsically motivated. You recognized the goal structure and acted appropriately. An 18-year-old version of you would not be able to do that. Even
No,
if you
definitely not.
realized it, even if you realized that you wouldn't be able to act on it because you're still stuck in the stage of acquiring sufficient knowledge to even understand why it's a decision to begin with, let alone make it.
Dude, the 2009 version of me wouldn't have made that decision.
Yeah, well,
Forget
hey,
18. You know, before, like maybe midway through our doctorate is when I feel like at that point is when the knowledge really turned into true skill.
yeah, I would agree with that. I would
And
agree with that based on my observation. Yeah.
yeah, and at that point that clicked and my career, you know, shot up. I mean, I was no longer just a subject matter expert. I was a sought after expert, which is much different.
Yeah. Right.
And hey, that just gets back into it. But let's think about that. Like, so in 2009, that would have meant I would have been a professional for 11 years.
Mm-hmm.
In many places, 11 years of, we'll say job skill, you would be considered an expert if you, because I progressed. I mean, it's not like, I hadn't progressed over those 11 years. I started off on a help desk and eventually, achieved a director status at a, very large organization. So, by all counts and measures, it would be considered, an expert.
Mm-hmm.
Except when I look back, like my today self would have eaten my 2009 self alive. Like I would have chewed that person up and spit them out. Like you would. Like I don't think my 2009 version could work for me today.
Sure. Yeah. Well, but that's the natural progression of things. I think if you're aligning yourself towards these types of structures, because fundamentally the point you and I should be at in our lives is the realization that now that intrinsic framework isn't aligned to an external goal. The intrinsic internal framework is aligned to improving itself for itself, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, here's a big thing. Like, so I didn't pass my level 1 sommelier. Like there was no practice questions. I did what I thought was, I read the stuff and it didn't pass it. Hey, whatever, no big deal. I didn't know what to expect.
Right.
All right. Because they said, hey, 10% of the exam is going to be on this, 20 this, 20 this. So I focused accordingly. And it wasn't what I was expecting. And I asked them, hey, do you have any practice questions or anything like that? They didn't have anything. So I'm like, okay, I'm kind of going in this blind, which is fine. Fair enough. And hey, you need a 75 to pass and I got a 70. I'm not ashamed of it. I didn't know what to expect. And hey, sometimes you just got to lay it out there and see what happens and then course correct.
That's right.
So, okay. Was I disappointed? Yeah. I mean, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't disappointed, right? I didn't pass. It's not the first time that I failed at something. It won't be the last. It's how you respond. And I think, again, this comes back to it matters when the game, the match, life is on the line. How do you respond?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so, all right, in this particular case, what did I do? I went back and took a look at the material I was provided. And sure enough, the guy puts in a list of all of the inspirational books that allowed him to create this document. So what did I do? I ordered every one of those fucking books.
Yeah.
And I'm going to read all, which is about 9. And he said there's countless others, but he named 9 books. So I ordered all 9 books, part of which I will bring to the distillery and they will stay up there as a showcase of, hey, like, if you don't have this knowledge, you can't have a skill of making proper whiskey. So I ordered all of them. And that's what the one book I don't know if we were talking about on the show or the pre-show, but essentially, it was written in 1930, and it's, and it's a fabulously written book so far. And I'm like, okay, I get it. That's why, like, this is the first book on whiskey. And so I'm reading it. I've got all these other books. I'll read all of those books, and then I'll reread the material again, and then I'll take the test again.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't change my love or passion for wanting to make some good spirits. And you know what? And for what it's worth, if it was just that easy, then it probably wouldn't have, I would probably be going, it's a paper cert. Like, it was detailed. Like, I mean, they asked different things of, what is the what's the difference in when you are making your wort, if the water is considered hard or soft?
Mm-hmm.
Because here's the thing, depending on who you ask, they want soft water, the other one wants hard water. Well, it is a completely disputed amongst all of the regions of people making whiskey as to which you need. So what's the answer? Well, to me, the answer is, it depends. Like, what are you trying to make? Like, what is it you're trying? Because I could have, like, so let's say, you and I, we're on your tobacco farm that you've got out there with all those chickens, right? And so we both are going to start a distillery at the exact same time, and we're just across the street from another, and there's a creek going right between us. Okay. Mm-hmm. And our water source is going to be that creek. Our two whiskeys will not taste anywhere close to the same. Too many factors. Mm-hmm. Your taste buds, my taste buds, when we got the water, when did we do, all those different, even though the water would be the same, doesn't matter if it's hard, soft, whatever that water came in, it's going to be a little bit different. You might have gotten a little bit colder. I might have gotten a little bit warmer. As I'm creating the distillate, you might have a warmer temperature, so it took longer for those vapors to cool. I might have had a colder temperature, so it was shorter. Where I did the cut versus where you do the cut, all of these factors that play into account. The grains, even if we got the grains from the exact same place, and there's countless. I mean, there's hundreds of distilleries in Scotland, and ones that are literally exactly how I described. So, what does it matter? I think the Highlands is a hard water, and actually in the Islays they're soft water, if I remember correctly. Everyone just has a different opinion, but they get into those nuances, like, why would this matter? Why does this matter? Where will you see a hard water versus a soft water? Tell me the difference between lowland whiskey versus Highland whiskey, and what are the characteristics? And a peated level of scotches put in the order of which, from most heavily peated to least peated. Like, you have to know. I mean, there's a shit ton of distilleries you got to know about, and I'm like, all right, got a little bit more work to do. Perfectly fine with it. I mean, how else am I going to get to that if I can't describe all those things? So,
well, how else are you going to convert knowledge into skill? It's the same thing of why you roll in BJJ. You have to be immersed in some experience such that you can learn how to convert knowledge to skill and manifest it. I totally agree, man.
Yeah. And people ask me, like, well, are you going to, oh, how'd you do? I'm like, I didn't pass. Oh, are you going to talk about that? Yeah. I'm not embarrassed.
But embarrassed by trying? That why? Like, no, that should be applauded.
Right. I mean, I'm going, hey, look, it's not like I have been. I mean, technically, I'm not a professional distiller at this point. Like, I've gone to classes, I've done, some academic research. I know how to make beer because it's legal. You can do that all day, every day. I know how to convert grain into alcohol, and you've had my beer, you've had my cider, all that stuff's legal. Like, I could do that, and it's not, all those things are perfectly fine. I know how to do that. So we started this distillery a officially down that path sometime in September when we started taking classes. Dude, that was in September. So I decided I was going to do this. I'm not embarrassed. Because here's the thing. When you remember when Silent Circle went under, I had no active certifications. In 6 weeks, I passed 5 certifications.
Yeah.
Why? Because I had all this knowledge. If I didn't pass them, that would be a problem. And even still, some of them, hey, like the CISM, that's not an easy one to pass.
Mm.
You know, the CEH was a joke. I mean, that was like, I got to tell you, like, I am anyone that perpetuates EC Council stuff. I just kind of go, that is, you passed a test. There's no application of that knowledge. There's no skill. I have not seen anything with that. It's just, I haven't seen anyone that perpetuates today. Mind you, when the CEH first came out, those people were a little bit different. They were hungry, I think, but not today. So, yeah, I'm kind of glad that it was as difficult as what it was. I didn't know what to expect. I was given a bunch of material, which was basically just a book. And, hey, here's what you got to do. Study from this. Awesome. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And so I did. I'm like, okay, well, I think I'm ready. But, you know, I don't know. The only way you're going to know is to test yourself.
That I was just going to say, spot on. That's exactly why we have the concept of a test. The concept of a test isn't to give you something to pass. The concept of a test is to assess where you're at in your conversion of knowledge to skill.
Absolutely. But and here's the big thing. So I was asked, well, what would I have done if I had passed? I said, well, it would depend on what my score was. Like if I got in the 90th percentile, I'd be like, okay, well, then I know what's going on. If I got a 76, I feel like I would have done the exact same thing I did right now. I'd want to read those other books. Why?
Right.
Because there's going to be a level 2 certification, and that's going to be a little bit more challenging. And so if it's going to be challenging or more challenging, my current level of effort would not be sufficient for the next level of achievement.
Yeah, that missing 24%, as it were, is probably material.
Yeah. So I got to go find that out because it's going to get harder as you move up the ranks. So, I would still be doing the exact same thing. I mean, the other part is, look, our so to speak, mentor, our teacher in the distilling, he teaches these things. Well, I also want to teach these things. And so if I'm going to teach it, I got to teach it better than what he taught it. Not because he did a bad job, but I want to build upon it. I can't build upon it if he's been doing this for 20 years. He's also, he was a geologist. So he knows how this stuff works in the ground and understands those things. All right, I got to stand on him as a giant, and he makes some good product. His stuff is, it's downslope distilling. For those that don't know, it's good product. If my stuff is half as good as that, I will be amazed. I mean, he's won gold medals with his whiskeys and his rums and like all of his products have won. They've all placed in the different competitions that are out there, like from the American Distillers Institute, stuff like that. Big name stuff like his. It's. I mean, especially like I got to tell you, his rum that is aged in a Cabernet barrel.
Yeah, you were telling me about that last week. That's interesting,
dude. I got to tell you, it is so delicious. I've told him. I think I've told him at least. He's not charging enough money for it. He's just not, because it's like $35 or something like that. It's not expensive. Like you got to bump that price up, dude. Like you just got to. He also makes an agave. Can't call it tequila, so he gets agave extract and turns it into a distilled spirit, and then he ages it. It smells really good. I don't do good with with agave, but the missus loves it. So I'm like, okay, it smells amazing. But hey, again, skill. You can't achieve skill without knowledge, And I also believe you can't achieve skill without testing yourself, how you're going to get better. Iron sharpens iron.
Agreed. Well said, man.
It's fun. And so, I don't know. I mean, it's going to take me a little while probably to read these, however many books. I think it's 8 books I ordered. I can't remember. However many it is, it's when I finish reading them all, I'll do it again. So, I don't know, a couple weeks. Yeah. Some of the books are a little bit, we'll say my assumption just based on the initial size that there's more content than others, but for all I know, it's a friggin' comic book in the middle. I didn't.
Well, and indubitably there's going to be overlap, and that stuff you're probably going to pay less attention to than the stuff that's unique.
Well, I thought about that, and I said if they're all saying the same thing, then that's probably what I'm going to be tested on. Maybe not necessarily the uniqueness of each book, but if they're all saying the same thing, that's probably the things that are really important.
Yeah.
That's my guess. But what do I know? I mean, no one should necessarily just listen to me about all those things.
Well, you're going to have to read a few of them to find out how true that is.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Itself a test, right? This is an intrinsically motivated test.
Yeah, I want to know. I mean, this is why I tell people, like, look, make a decision. Why make a decision? Because the results are going to tell you whether you were right or wrong. And if you were wrong, then, well, pivot. Like, that's, we were talking about this last week about like being a problem solver. You want to be a problem solver? Or do you want to be right? I think there's there's a huge difference between those two.
There's not a lot of decisions we make in life where we know for a fact it's the last decision we'll ever make, right? I mean, that's the beauty of decision making is it very often, I think almost exclusively, a series of decisions. And okay, so maybe this one isn't absolutely correct, but that doesn't make it that I can't choose something else the next time.
I think the most of what you just said really boils down to this. Almost 99.99999% of the time, we're never making a decision that's going to end our life or someone else's.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And so, therefore, what's the real consequence of moving forward and then reevaluating your position? I think it's low. I think it's a much lower risk than death.
Yeah, well, I would actually argue that there's very little, because the beauty of it is that even in hindsight, bad decision puts you into a situation to make another decision, and now you have sufficient experience to translate into knowledge. It's the people that refuse to make decisions until they have perfect knowledge that actually are creating more risk than is present.
Yeah, and what is perfect knowledge? To me, that doesn't exist.
I don't know either, dude. I don't know.
I honestly just don't know. I'm like, well, what are you talking about?
Yeah, no, man. I've experienced firsthand people that obsess over minute details at the cost of moving forward, and meanwhile, not only are you not moving forward, but all the other decisions that you could have made are either disappearing or piling up, and you're not getting to them.
Or no longer relevant, and someone else got the advantage over you because now they have the patent.
Yeah, right, exactly.
It's their trademark. They were first to market. There's a thing, and at U of M, we talk about, do you want to be first to market or do you want to be a fast follower? Well, the answer is it depends.
Mm-hmm.
It's all based on your personality. Mm-hmm. For me, I want to be a fast follower. I'm kind of like, in this case, Steve Prefontaine. I'm going to be the front runner, and I'm going to make you run my pace because I believe I can outwork you. And so you're going to run at my pace. The fast follower, you're not going to be that fast because I'm going to continue to iterate, and I'm going to keep that pace going. That's my personality. Is what I would do. I want to push the pace. Other people like to counter, and that's perfectly fine. That's because that's what they're good at. You got to play to whatever your strengths are, because if you don't play to your strengths, knowledge will not come, and therefore it will not result in a higher degree of skill.
Mm-hmm. Right?
Don't do things you're not good at. Like, it's just not. I mean, it's a difference if you just want to know, like, okay, I just want to figure this out. I want to do it. But like as a profession, as your job, as whatever it is, don't invest time into things you're just not good at. It's a waste of time. You're literally degrading your strengths and therefore degrading your skill because you're trying to achieve something that you don't enjoy. I don't think you can, and that's another, I guess another point. I don't think you can achieve skill if you don't enjoy it.
Agreed. 100%.
You've got to be like, I want to embrace the suck of that. I want to feel that pain. I want to feel that burn because I love this. I'm passionate about it. The fire is there. If you don't have that, I don't think you can ever say you have true skill.
Yeah, I would agree.
Anyway, I think that about wraps it up. We talked a little bit about, a little bit of BJJ and how this applies. I mean, I think, I gotta tell you, I think many people will benefit from taking something like BJJ, where you're going to, I mean, I didn't realize this even. I mean, okay, I've only rolled once in terms of BJJ, so not that I'm some expert, but I got to tell you, I'm still much more mentally exhausted from that than I am physically, by far. And so what has that done? Well, in my other parts of spare time, I'm researching all this BJJ stuff. Like, how did this happen? What can I do? I don't want this to happen again. Like, I want to be better than what I was the last time. And what are all the things that white belts and blue belts really need to focus on in order to properly stay motivated and want to continue to grow? Like, so I'm going, okay, had class on Monday. Today's Wednesday. I'm still mentally exhausted from my Monday class because I'm still thinking about all of those different connection points that occurred. And I'm like, how did I not know this? Like, okay, like I got a good sense when someone does grab me as to how to go. This is also on the ground. So I don't have the feeling of push, pull in my feet like I'm used to.
Yeah, you can't back up. I mean, you can't go through the ground. There's nowhere to go.
Yeah. So that mental exhaustion, even though I'm sore, my mentally much more sore than physically by far. And I got to be honest, I don't think I've ever experienced that in any other discipline that I've had. That chess match.
It has a very peculiar intensity to it. And those brief flashes of explosion, because it's just fundamentally different. It's not the same as exploding forwards or backwards when you're on your feet.
Yeah, it's true. So
there you go. Well done, man.
All right, my friend. Same. So for those that are just kind of maybe tuning in and kind of little housekeeping there to kind of close it up. Just looking out, just so people know. May 26th is our last Whiskey Wednesday for the season. The Ninja and I will return sometime in August, September. We haven't really talked about it, but we got to recharge. We got to get those juices flowing and figure out all the different topics we're going to talk about. And well, how are we going to grow? Like we gotta have some time to grow as individuals, so that way we can, talk trash about Conor McGregor's proper 12. Which, hey, you know what? I'll just say it. I don't care if someone offers me $600 million. I'm not looking to sell my distillery. I don't care. That's not the reason for why I'm doing it. It's not about the money.
750.
No, because I feel like it's worth more than that. It's not worth my legacy. It's not worth my what I believe when I leave this world. My imprint of what is accomplished is still there. So Conor McGregor's not that. I mean, that was not the reason for those things for him. He's got other aspirations. And hey, you know what? Marketing, business, everything that he did with that, hey, hats off to you. Like who else has done that?
Hey, I'll tell you, man, if he ever sits back and writes a book on, if he ever outlines either in a podcast, a documentary, or a book, his decision-making process behind the scenes in his business, that's something I would really pay a lot of money for.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, there you go, man.
All right, my friends. We'll see you all same bat time, same bat channel next Wednesday for Whiskey Wednesday. If you have any topics you want the Ninja and I to talk about, you know how to reach us. Take care, everyone. Ninja, have a great week.
You too.
Talk to you all later.
Bye, everybody.